Hi fellow armchair detectives, Caroline Mitchell here. This week I am sharing a fascinating tale of scandal, adultery and death in the town where I grew up in Ireland. So stay tuned, you won't want to miss this one. Before we begin, I will start with my usual disclaimer. The information I have researched is available in the public domain. The cases I discuss are not ones that I've dealt with in my career as a police detective, and I wouldn't do that out of respect for the victims. I give my opinion at the end of each case, so do stick around to find out how I feel about it and what I think really happened. This case is the case of Philomena Gillane, and it happened in the small town of Athlone, very near where I grew up. It was the blue Opel Kadett that caught Frank Hennigan's attention. It was parked amongst dozens of others in the Athlone car park, but still it caught his eye. And as he approached it, he noticed something unusual. He looked into the car and it was a bit messy, but nothing too strange. But it was the license plate that caught his attention. Because Frank was a car enthusiast. And he remembered the registration plate because it had been circulated by police just 48 hours before. So Frank got out and he walked around, and it wasn't until he saw the anorak cord hanging from the boot of the car that his blood turned cold. It's a sad tale of betrayal and deception, and it's hard to believe it happened just right round the corner from where I lived. Philomena Glenn was 38 years of age. She was described as an elegant lady, private, but had a smile and a word for everyone, but the family did keep to themselves. She had a sister named Bridie and a brother and a mum named Nonnie. She met Pat in September 1990 in Donahue's pub in County Clare. She met him at a festival in Lisdoonvarna. It's one of the biggest singles festivals in Europe every year. And although she was in a relationship with someone else, when he scribbled his phone number on the back of a matchbox, she couldn't but resist getting in touch. Patrick Gillan was 10 years younger than Philomena. At 28, he was described as a snappy dresser with a good line in chat. He regarded himself as a lady killer, irresistible to the women, according to a close source. He worked on the family's 80-acre farm and did a little bit of truck driving on the side, but both parents had passed away by the time he met his future wife. Fast forward May 1994 and Philomena was pregnant with her second child. She was working as a cook week on, week off in a Dublin hospital. And she left for work early Wednesday morning, about 10 to 7 on the 11th of May. The following Sunday, Pat reported his wife missing, telling the Gardaí that she hadn't turned up for work. Now, he said the reason he waited until Sunday to report it was because they called once a week and she wasn't there when he rang. Appeals were made for her welfare and a missing persons account was taken. Nobody could understand why she just disappeared into thin air. On Thursday, May the 19th, 1994, Philomena was found in the boot of her car in Athlone train station. She had been shot in the back and stabbed 6 times. She was dead, needless to say, although forensics would report later she didn't die immediately. The whole place was shocked by this. I remember it hitting the news, and nobody could understand why someone would do that to a pregnant woman with a child at home. She wasn't badly off for money. She had money in the bank. Her and her husband were building their new home, which was meant to be beautiful by all accounts. She was well respected and liked in the village, well respected at her place of work. She was ambitious. She wanted a good life for her family. So why on earth did she end up shot dead and stabbed in the boot of her own car? Nobody could understand it, and her husband was on television crying as he asked for people to find out just what had happened to his wife. Her husband Patrick told the Star newspaper that his life had fallen apart since his wife's disappearance and death, but things were about to take a massive turn. According to locals, every dog on the street, knew exactly who killed Philomena Gillane. After Philomena's funeral, a homeless man walked into a Dublin Gardaí station and said he knew who killed Philomena Gillane. He told Gardaí that her husband had approached him and his friend to kill his wife. Patrick was arrested and charged with soliciting both men, Christopher Bulger and Michael Doyle, to kill his wife. 10 days later, he was arrested for questioning with regards to his wife's murder. He was charged with soliciting the two men to kill his wife. Patrick pleaded not guilty at court, and all the sordid details came to light. So let's go back. Let's rewind. Back to the wedding. Patrick moved into Philomena's family home. It was a large whitewashed house in Caltra. It had no running water and no telephone. Back then in rural Ireland, that wasn't all that unusual. I remember growing up, I knew of neighbours a lot further down where I lived that had no telephone and no water. There was a strong sense of community in Ireland. It was a Catholic country and everybody knew everyone, and if you crossed over the lines or broke the rules, everyone would know about it. Hence, I guess, why everyone had their suspicions that Patrick was the person who killed his wife, because they knew what had been going on under her nose all along. Patrick took a shine to Philomena's sister, Bridie, when he was dating Philomena, and he took her to the Rose of Tralee, another festival in Ireland. 5 months after his wedding to Philomena, he took her out again to none other than Listonvarna, where he had brought his wife. How romantic. He stated afterwards that his mother-in-law, Nunny, was well aware that he was sleeping with both sisters while under the same roof. Bridie was later recalled to say that Patrick kept forcing himself on her. He kept pestering her. She didn't want to go out at him, but she did. I had no say, she said. It should never have been, when asked about the living arrangements. According to Gardaí, which is the Irish term for police, marriage did not suit Patrick very well. He became depressed, he took to his bed, he drank heavily, and he stayed there for many days. He refused to work, all the symptoms and signs of a deep depression. Christmas 1993, he arrived drunk and aggressive and came home and told his wife exactly what had been going on. There was a massive argument, as you can imagine, and the two sisters fought whilst living under the same roof. Then on another occasion, Philomena was said to have walked into a pub where her sister worked and her husband frequented. And when he refused to go home, that's when the real argument began, and she slapped him in front of everyone. Philomena threatened to take her husband for every penny he had, and these are the words that could have sealed her fate. The couple did not have a happy marriage in the short time they were together. Twice, Patrick strangled or attempted to strangle his wife, and he admitted himself to a psychiatric unit, each time leaving afterwards against the staff's advice. So to me it was obvious Philomena was a victim of domestic abuse. She was living in a toxic situation, and things would take an even worse turn. So what about the men that reported Patrick to have tried to hire them to kill his wife? I'm going to read you out some of the details of the conversation as was reported in the media at the time. So forgive me if I look at my notes. So the jury heard evidence from Mr. Christopher Bulger, Mr. Michael Doyle, and their interaction went something like this. Christopher and Michael were approached by Patrick, who bought them both 20 cigarettes. "Are you working, lads?" Patrick said. "Where do you live?" The men looked at him quizzically before replying. And then he added, "I've got a job for you. I want you to kill a woman in a hospital." The two men looked at him, and one said, "What are you after? Are you gay or something?" To which Patrick replied, "I'm not gay. I have a job for you. I'll pay you both a lot of money." In which they said they were offered a substantial sum of money. "Are you looking for a prostitute?" one of the men said, "because there's plenty of them round here." "No," the man replied, presumed to be Patrick. I want you to do this job for me. If you can't, you're no good to me. And to which the men said they weren't interested. He said, do you know of anyone that'd be interested in killing me wife? She's threatened to take everything I own. Both men looked at each other and said, what sort of son of a bitch is this? Then they told Patrick there was no way they would do it. And he replied they were no good to him, and he drove away. Patrick admitted to being in Dublin that day, although he had told Bridie he was going to Limerick to buy wheels for his tractor. But evidence suggested that was a lie, and he had no choice but to own up to it. When he was spoken to by the guards about what the two men accused him of, he vehemently denied it. And his reply was, I'm not standing in any parade for these CUNTS. They're only winos from Dublin. Sure, they'll do anything for a drink. So after Philomena's death, Patrick moved out of her family home. And his sister took him and his young son in. But things were difficult, as he claimed that Philomena's family kept visiting the boy, and Nonny, Philomena's mother, apparently said to him, I'll tell you who killed your mammy when you're older. Can you imagine? How horrific, that poor child. Anyway, his sister took the child for a while. I don't know what happened to Patrick, but she took the child into care, but said that it was too difficult with the family continually visiting. So she gave him up to children's social care. Later in court, Patrick would say that he was attached to his son and visited him regularly. So let's talk about this love triangle that was going on under the same roof. Well, Philomena, as I said earlier, stated that Patrick was always pestering her and wouldn't leave her alone, and she tried to end the affair in October 1993. But he wouldn't take no for an answer and was always forcing himself on her. Patrick claimed that Bridie was always shoving herself at him, and that he tried to end things in December 1993 when he told his wife, and that's when the big argument blew up. He said he's told his wife because his conscience was annoying him. Well, at least he had one. In court there were further dramas, as Philomena's mother was due to give evidence and collapsed and died in court of a heart attack. Testimonials of his good character were submitted by Patrick's parish priest, his doctor and 2 business colleagues, and he had no previous history with police. During her 25 minutes in the witness box, Philomena's sister Bridie gave her account of things. She painted a very dark picture of Patrick and said that he never wanted the baby, that she even had a conversation with him about it next to the fireplace one night when he said there was no way he wanted that child, and he got so upset and angry that he took himself off to bed. Each time Bridie spoke of her sister, she spoke of her shame and regret, and every time she mentioned her name, she ended the sentence with the words, God have mercy on her. And I believe that she did feel sorrow and regret, and could never have imagined what happened to her sister as a result of their affair. Galan was found guilty by a jury on the 8th of December, guilty of soliciting Christopher Bulger and Mr. Michael Doyle to murder his wife. He made legal history as the first man in Ireland who had ever been found guilty of such a thing. He was jailed for 8 years, served 6. It was a jury of 8 women and 4 men that unanimously convicted him after just a 6-day trial. The judge said it was difficult to imagine a more vile and vicious crime than a man plotting to kill his own pregnant wife. So what actually happened on the morning of Philomena's death? Well, the file is still open on Philomena's murder. To date, no one has been found guilty of it. To me, well, it seems that everyone, as they said, like the dog on the street, is a good idea who did it. But at least some justice was served when her husband was found guilty of soliciting the 2 men to kill her. Apparently, he also tried to solicit another man in Gort in Galway to do the same thing. And although I'm only surmising, it seems he may well have found someone in the end. Evidentially, a small fingerprint was found on the mirror of the car. 2 men were seen acting suspiciously in the area up to weeks before her death. People don't miss much in Ireland. If there's a stranger knocking about, they'll know about it, and it will be the talk of the place. And people had seen these men and a car nearby where Philomena lived, and it was only afterwards that it came to light that they may have been up to no good. No murder weapons have been found, although it's believed a shotgun, one which shoots when it shoots not bullets, pellets, was used, and a knife. Okay, so here's my opinion, and it's based on witness accounts, forensics found at the scene, and circumstantial evidence. But it is just my opinion, and as I said, no one has been found guilty of her murder so far. Well, men were seen in the area on the morning that Philomena was believed to have been murdered. It was a Wednesday morning, and as usual, she was setting off to work in Dublin, week on, week off. She was getting ready to go to work, and we think that she must have seen someone coming up her drive and got afraid, because this well-dressed and nice woman who was organised and with it ran out to her car with some of her nightwear still on. She jumped into her car and she drove down her drive. Now, she must have seen her killers and got scared, because then she jumped back out of her car and started running towards the house. She was 7 months pregnant at the time, so this must have been so difficult for her. But as she ran towards the house, she was shot in the back with a shotgun. Now, neighbours heard the shot, and her mother heard the shot as she slept in bed. Her mum was minding her son, and she didn't get up to check. Later, she would say that she thought maybe her daughter had had a burst tyre on her way to work. Neighbours also said they heard the shot, but it wasn't unusual out in rural Ireland back then. Lots of farmers owned shotguns. It was very common, which they went out and killed rabbits and crows, things that were considered vermin on the farm. But regardless of that, Philomena was shot on her drive, according to forensic evidence, and bundled into the boot of her own car. Half an hour later, her car was seen driving away at speed. So where was the car in between that Wednesday morning and the following week when she was found? We still don't know. And we still don't know who carried out the physical act of murdering her. And that's awful. I mean, thank God that the witnesses did go to the guards and report the fact that Patrick had tried to solicit them to kill his wife. And people were afraid of Patrick. I mean, later the guard who handled the case at the time, the detective, was awarded over 300,000 euros in damages because of the stress the case had on him. Apparently, Patrick threatened to kill him. And there weren't just threats, there were phone calls all hours of the day and night, silent when he picked them up. Cars would drive up and down past his house. Apparently, Patrick had threatened his life for hassling him about his wife's case. After serving 6 years in prison, Patrick started his life again and started a haulage firm, but ended up owing almost €500,000 in tax. I mean, why would anyone kill their 7-month pregnant wife? Why not just separate? That's always the question, isn't it? Why go to murder? Why pay someone all that money? I mean, neither of them were badly off. Patrick had been left a good inheritance after his parents died. He owned a good chunk of the farm and they were building a big house, and Philomena, she had over £80,000 in the bank when she died, so she wasn't badly off either. So I can't see it was for money initially, but then again, remember what the men said when they were solicited. He told them that he wanted someone to kill his wife because she had threatened to take every penny he had. And maybe with 2 children, he thought that could just happen. Don't forget, divorce was illegal in Ireland back then. It just didn't happen. There was no such thing as divorce or abortion. Catholic country, and scandals were rife. Everyone knew your business, and that was very important in a small knit community. Scandal like that stuck. People looked at you funny if you walked down the street. I remember growing up, the whispers and the gossip. Ireland's a great place. It has a great sense of community and people look after their own. But when there's gossip in the rural communities. And maybe he just didn't want that. Maybe he just wanted to be a widow rather than someone who split up with his wife and she took him for every penny he had. He didn't want the second child. And did he even want Philomena? And don't forget, she was a victim of domestic abuse, and that's the most dangerous place to be. A love triangle and a victim of domestic abuse. And sometimes the mentality of, well, if I can't have you, no one else can. It's power, isn't it? It's not love, it's power. When someone doesn't want their other half to be with someone else. And for him, death was the most convenient way out, if that's what happened. What do you think? I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Leave your comments below and let me know what you think about this case. Do you remember it happening? Were you in Ireland at the time? Gosh, I do. It'll stay with me for a very long time. But I'll have more cases coming up, so join me next week for a very twisty-turny case, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. And lastly, don't forget, these cases are very rare, and I can tell you that from the heart. I worked as a detective, I know these things are rare, so don't lose sleep over it.